This is not the type of video usually featured on this channel, as it does not involve a particular court case or decision, but it is a topic that needs to be spoken about. Misogyny in the music industry. This video will discuss this scourge primarily as it applies in Ireland, but we will also take a quick look at the UK and the USA, which involve much bigger music industries than here in Ireland. We will recognize the similarities in all three of these jurisdictions, and then discuss what can the law do about it. And the reason I am doing this video and not a female colleague is because if she did it, we would get the usual sexist comments like, "Typical woman, always whinging. So shut up and listen." When we hear the word misogyny, we may imagine a man shouting something hateful about women. That certainly qualifies. But in the music industry, misogyny is usually quieter and much more powerful. It is the promoter who decides that one woman on the bill is enough. The producer who assumes the woman in the studio is the singer, never the engineer. The executive who thinks a male performer becomes distinguished with age, while a female performer simply becomes old. And it is the unspoken warning: complain about what happened backstage, and the telephone may stop ringing. This video looks at Ireland, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Not because every man in music is a misogynist. Plainly, that would be nonsense. The question is whether the structure of the industry repeatedly gives men more power, doubts women's ability, judges women by their appearance, and leaves people afraid to report abuse. We will begin in Ireland, move to Britain, and then cross the Atlantic. Finally, we will ask the lawyer's favorite question: what should the law actually do about it? Ireland has no shortage of extraordinary women in music. From traditional music to rock, folk, electronic music, and pop, the talent is obvious. Yet talent and opportunity are not the same thing. The best musician-specific Irish research is the University of Galway report, Gendered Experiences of the Irish Music Industry, published in 2023. It drew on the experiences of 529 musicians. Its central finding was simple: a musician's gender has a profound effect on everyday working life, and sexism is common. That does not mean every woman had the same experience, nor does it mean men never encounter unfairness. The report records men's concerns too, including complaints that gender-balancing initiatives could exclude them. But when the experiences are compared, the burden on women is broader, more frequent, and often more threatening. The problem begins with gatekeepers. In music, a gatekeeper may be a promoter, venue owner, radio programmer, producer, sound engineer, manager, festival booker, or record label executive. Ireland's industry is small. People know one another. Work often arrives through a message, a friendship, or a recommendation, not through an advertised job with an interview panel and an appeal procedure. That informality can feel friendly. It can also be almost impossible to challenge. If a promoter overlooks you because you are a woman, there may be no rejection letter and no evidence. You simply are not booked. Women in the Galway research repeatedly described a credibility deficit. They were talked over, not listened to or given praise, with a little barb attached. Very good for a girl. Their knowledge of instruments, technology, and live sound was doubted. People expressed surprise that they were instrumentalists. Women were mistaken for groupies or treated as if a male colleague must be the person in charge. Two findings capture this. About 2/3 of the women surveyed said that people had, at least sometimes, expressed surprise that they were instrumentalists. Most said they had sometimes or often been dismissed as just a singer. There is nothing wrong with being a singer, of course. The word just is doing the dirty work. It suggests that the real musical intelligence must belong to somebody else, usually the man beside the mixing desk. These small incidents can sound trivial in isolation, but careers are made from hundreds of small judgments. Who appears competent? Who is trusted with equipment? Who is invited back? Who is introduced to the right person after the gig? A persistent assumption that women are less technically serious gradually becomes a system for distributing work. The Irish evidence then becomes darker. Women describe pressure to look pretty or sexy, being told they were not attractive enough, and being valued as decoration rather than musicians. One respondent recalled being asked to join a band because she would look good in a dress. Others described sexual harassment, intimidation, and fear for their personal safety. Some were nervous about being alone in a recording studio. Others said late-night sessions were effectively inaccessible unless they could arrange a lift or bring somebody with them. This creates a cruel contradiction. The industry may expect a female artist to be sexually marketable, but if a powerful person sexualizes, harasses, or assaults her, she may be blamed for being present, for what she wore, or for having wanted the opportunity in the first place. The issue is not simply unpleasant behavior. Safety precautions cost women opportunities. If you cannot attend the late session, travel alone, remain at an informal gathering, or enter a studio without a companion, your working world becomes smaller. When the Galway study asked whether gender had been a barrier to gigs or festival slots, 37% of women said yes. Only 10% of men gave the same answer. Many women described male-heavy lineups and an informal culture in which, as one participant put it, lads book lads. There is another revealing phrase, the girl artist quota. A festival can accommodate endless male acts without thinking of them as representatives of their sex. But book 3 women artists or all-women bands and suddenly somebody asks whether there are too many women. Broadcasting tells a similar story. Research cited in the source document reported that during a 12-month period ending in June 2024, only 2% of the top 100 most played songs on Irish radio were by Irish women artists. That figure should not be treated as a complete measurement of every woman played on every station, but it is a striking picture of who reached the very top of repeated airplay. Airplay is not merely applause. It builds recognition, ticket sales, streaming, bargaining power, and the next opportunity. When women disappear from rotation, they also disappear from the evidence that programmers use to justify future decisions. Irish traditional music is often described as communal, informal, and open. Yet research by Dr. Una Monaghan found that the scene can privilege men's contributions. Women reported isolation, sexual innuendo, harassment, and assault. The session is a useful example of how exclusion need not involve a locked door. A person can technically be welcome, but continually interrupted, patronized, sexualized, or made to feel unsafe. Eventually, she stops attending. Later, somebody observes that fewer women seem interested. The exclusion has successfully disguised itself as personal choice. The pressure changes again when a musician becomes a mother. Half of the women in the relevant part of the Galway study identified childcare or family support as a difficulty, compared with 16% of men. Freelance music rewards constant availability, evenings, weekends, touring, and last-minute calls. There may be no maternity leave from a band, no right to keep your place on a festival circuit, and no easy route back after a year away. Women described being treated as less serious, being dropped from professional networks, and losing work after becoming mothers. Age can carry an additional penalty. A man may be marketed as seasoned, authentic, or legendary. A woman of the same age may be told that she is no longer commercially interesting. Misogyny does not simply ask whether a woman is talented. It asks whether she is young enough, attractive enough, available enough, and undemanding enough. Ireland has responded. Safe to Create is a national Dignity at Work program for the arts and creative sectors. Its work grew from research showing widespread bullying, harassment, sexual harassment, and intimidation, along with uncertainty about where to seek help. It provides a code of behavior, training, an anonymous report-to-support system, and routes towards counseling and legal assistance. Arts Council funding conditions now help to push funded organizations towards the code and relevant training. That matters. Public money should never subsidize a workplace that regards dignity as optional. But there is a gap. Anonymous reporting can reveal patterns. It does not determine an individual complaint. Training can change behavior. It cannot compel a hostile promoter to book someone again. A musician may deal with a pub, studio, festival, manager, and label, yet be employed by none of them. Irish employment equality law prohibits sex discrimination, harassment, sexual harassment, and victimization within its field of application. The Equal Status Act may matter when services are involved. Criminal law applies where conduct amounts to offenses such as assault or harassment. But the freelance relationship can leave a musician outside the clearest employment protections. So the Irish problem is not that we have no law and no initiatives. It is that the law still imagines a recognizable employer and workplace more readily than it imagines a singer hired for one night, in a venue she may never enter again, by people who can quietly control her future work. The United Kingdom has examined this problem more publicly than either Ireland or the United States. In 2024, the House of Commons Women and Equalities Committee described misogyny and discrimination in music as endemic. Its 2025 follow-up carried an even more dispiriting title, Misogyny in Music, on Repeat. And its conclusion? Little had changed. The committee heard about unequal opportunity, lower pay, ageism, sexual harassment, and abuse. It identified the familiar ingredients: freelance work, informal workplaces, late nights, alcohol and drugs, and enormous differences in power. A musician may depend on one manager, producer, or booking agent to gain access to an entire network. If that person behaves improperly, the theoretical freedom to walk away may mean walking away from the career as well. The UK musician census gives us two essential figures. Just over half of women musicians, 51%, said that they had experienced gender discrimination. 1/3 said that they had experienced sexual harassment while working as musicians. The point is not that every incident is identical. The point is scale. Once half of a group reports discrimination, the few bad apples explanation becomes very difficult to sustain. Women also earned less on average and experienced shorter, less financially sustainable careers, even though they were often more highly educated or trained. Disabled women, women from minority ethnic communities, and LGBTQ+ women faced compounded barriers. Music has a particularly effective form of retaliation. Nothing happens on paper. There may be no dismissal, disciplinary warning, or nasty letter. The gigs simply dry up. Messages go unanswered. Somebody whispers that the musician is difficult. Because every decision looks separate and informal, the pattern is hard to prove. The parliamentary reports were also highly critical of non-disclosure agreements used to silence allegations of harassment, discrimination, or bullying. Confidentiality is not always abusive. A victim may want privacy. The problem arises when a powerful organization effectively says, "Take this settlement, promise never to speak, and disappear." Since October 2024, British employers have had a positive duty to take reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment of employees. That shifts the law in the right direction. Prevention should begin before somebody is harmed. But the central gap remains. Many freelance musicians are not clearly protected in the same way as employees. The proposed Creative Industries Independent Standards Authority, CIISA, is intended to offer an independent place for advice and complaints across the creative industries. The idea is sound, but a standards body without secure funding, industry participation, investigative power, and protection against retaliation may become an impressive sign on a locked door. American popular music creates an illusion. We can name enormously successful female artists, so equality appears to have arrived. But turn the album over, figuratively at least, and read the credits. Women accounted for 36% of artists on the 2025 Billboard year-end chart, but only 14.5% of songwriters and just 4.4% of producers. That descending line tells the story. Women are most visible where the public is looking, and least visible where technical, creative, and financial authority is concentrated. A producer can influence who enters the studio, how an artist sounds, which song survives, who receives credit, and who shares publishing or recording income. Fewer than one producer in 20 on those major hits was a woman. That is not a talent shortage. It is an access and power problem. The executive picture is scarcely better. A 2025 USC study examined senior executives across more than 100 music companies. Among the presidents and chief executives of the largest companies, only about 13% were women. More than 4 in 5 were white men. This matters because executives decide which risks are worth taking, whose career receives sustained investment, and which behavior is tolerated from a profitable star or producer. Diversity at entry level is welcome, but if authority remains homogeneous at the top, the organization can look different without deciding differently. A large international industry study found that 3 in 5 women reported sexual harassment during their music careers, and 1 in 5 reported sexual assault. More than 70% did not report what happened. Those figures are international, not a United States-only prevalence study, so they must be used honestly. But they describe a commercial music world heavily influenced by American companies and working practices. One finding may explain the failure to change. Only 16% of male respondents believed that music was generally discriminatory on the ground of gender, compared with about half of women. The people least exposed to the problem are often the most confident that it does not exist. Federal law, particularly Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, 1964, prohibits sex discrimination, sexual harassment, and retaliation by covered employers. But Title VII generally protects employees, not genuine independent contractors, and it ordinarily applies only to employers meeting a minimum size threshold. State laws in places such as California and New York may provide broader protection, but the result is a patchwork. A touring musician's rights can change as quickly as the state line outside the bus window. So what can we learn from all of this? But more importantly, how do we fix it? In an attempt to find some sort of solution, I will first distill the commonalities across the 3 jurisdictions. After that, we can discuss what sort of laws could be a part of that solution, not only to punish offenders, but also to influence public perception. Ireland, the UK, and the United States have different customs and laws and different industries, yet the same themes recur. First, concentrated gatekeeping. A surprisingly small number of people control recording, airplay, bookings, promotion, funding, and professional introductions. Second, precarious work. Freelance musicians often have neither job security nor an HR department. The person they might complain about may also control the next paycheck. Third, informal workplaces. Studios, backstage areas, tour buses, hotel bars, and late-night venues blur the line between professional and social conduct. Fourth, sexualization and the credibility deficit. Women are expected to look marketable but are simultaneously treated as less technically capable or artistically authoritative. Fifth, retaliation without paperwork. Blacklisting does not require an actual blacklist. It requires only a small network of powerful people who stop returning calls. And sixth, deceptive visibility. A handful of global female stars cannot tell us who owns the company, controls the studio, writes the songs, divides the money, or decides which allegation will be taken seriously. So what would effective law look like? I suggest 5 linked reforms. 1. Extend equality and harassment protection to dependent freelancers. The law should focus on economic dependency and control, not merely the label self-employed. A musician hired for one night should not lose protection simply because there is no conventional employment contract. 2. Create an independent creative industries authority. It should accept complaints from employees, freelancers, students, and one-off performers, identify repeat allegations across different organizations, conduct fair investigations, and refer possible crimes to the appropriate authorities. Ireland could build on Safe to Create. Britain could give CIISA secure statutory footing. The United States would probably require both federal standards and compatible state enforcement. 3. Outlaw professional retaliation and blacklisting. Protection must extend beyond dismissal. Canceling gigs, withdrawing representation, interfering with credits, or circulating retaliatory warnings should attract legal consequences where a complaint was made honestly or evidence was provided. 4. Restrict abusive NDAs. Nobody should be contractually silenced about sexual assault, harassment, discrimination, or serious bullying. A complainant should remain free to request confidentiality, but secrecy should belong to the victim, not be purchased by the powerful. 5. Attach conditions to money and permission. Public funding, venue licenses, and major festival permissions should require a code of conduct, trained safeguarding contacts, safe reporting procedures, published equality information, and cooperation with independent investigations. There are other necessary measures: transparent recording credits, data on pay, airplay, and festival bookings, safe studio and touring standards, childcare support, and repeated research, particularly in Ireland. But the legal principle is straightforward. If an industry profits from freelance labor, it must also accept responsibility for freelance safety. Misogyny in music does not survive because women lack talent. It survives because talent must pass through gates, and too many of those gates are controlled informally, invisibly, and without accountability. The law cannot make somebody respect a female musician, but it can remove the commercial advantage of disrespect. It can make harassment costly, retaliation actionable, secrecy limited, and protection independent of a neat 9-to-5 employment contract. Music is often where society imagines freedom. The people who make it should not have to trade their dignity, safety, or silence for the chance to be heard. I'm Bebop Olula, and this has been I Fought the Law. Adios.
I fought the law. I fought the law. I fought the law.